All right, this is Unit 7, Presentation 3 over the Arab-Israeli conflict, and this is probably the most important presentation that we go over in this unit. So this political cartoon is just kind of an introduction to the conflict. So you have Israel standing in the middle, then Hamas and Hezbollah, which are two terrorist organizations, Palestinian terrorist organizations. And you got Israel saying, but we give you land for peace. And then Hezbollah says, we want that peace. And so basically it's the idea that Israel has offered land in order to get peace. But the Palestinians want more and more, and actually they just want Israel to be gone. And obviously that's one point of view. This cartoonist obviously supports the idea of that Israel has tried to create peace, which is one side of the story. All right, so quick history. So again, this area used to be part of the Roman Empire. I mentioned in the last presentation how the Romans took over and the Jews left in the diaspora. So they left for 2,000 years. During that time, the Palestinians moved into this region and lived there for the past 2,000 years. And then the Jews come back after the Holocaust, basically, and move back in. And then Israel's recreated, and they feel like that they've been pushed out. Because they were like, well, we've been here for 2,000 years. And the Jews are saying, well, this was originally our homeland. You know, we were here 3,000 years ago, and then we got kicked out against our will. And so now we're coming back to take it. All right, so basic stuff behind the story. So this goes back really into the 1800s. You have this big movement by a group called the Zionists. And the Zionists want to recreate the state of Israel and bring it back and create a Jewish homeland. And in 1917, the British, since they controlled this area where Israel would be, they issued the Balfour Declaration, which is where they promised to create a Jewish state for the people there and allow the Jews to begin moving into the region. Now, they don't talk to the Palestinians who are living there about this, or any of the Arabs in the region. They're obviously going to be upset and begin revolting. So Jews begin migrating into the region in big numbers. Obviously, you're going to start seeing clashes between the Jews and the Arabs at this point, because again, the Arabs were not talked to about this. And Jews begin moving in mass numbers. So to give you an idea, in 1920, there's one Jew for every 10 Arabs. By 1947, there's 2 Arabs for every Jew. And so the Arabs have this feeling that they're losing control of their country, that they have no say, and that, that basically they're going to be pushed out. They're becoming fearful at this point. And the Jews, since they're not welcomed in, obviously, they can't really try to integrate with the society there and try to live with them. So what the Jews do is they use something called the kibbutz system. All right, so because of this, because the Jews couldn't integrate into society, they basically used what's called the kibbutz system, where they lived in communal living. And they worked together to make the desert bloom, meaning they lived in areas where before you couldn't farm, but they were able to come up with techniques and ways and irrigation systems in order to be able to farm those regions. But since they're living separate from one another, they're not going to solve any of these problems, this fear and this climate of distrust between the two. So this leads to the Arab riots in 1929, and where their protest was Isba al-Yahud, which means slaughter all the Jews. So obviously they're not feeling too good about the Jews at this point. So you see Jewish immigration, again, really picks up in the 1920s, hence leading to these Arab riots, and drops off during these riots. And then it picks up again as Hitler takes over Germany and begins enacting laws to limit Jewish freedom as well. So they start moving in quickly. And then you get the Palestine Arab revolt, and they begin to meet and come up with goals. And these 3 goals: in Jewish immigration to Palestine, to end Jewish land transfer to Jews. So basically, Jews can't own land; they won't feel tied there, and also the Palestinians would basically be over them; they'd be controlling them. And then a new general representative government that's not going to have Jews in it. And keep in mind the timing of this. This is 36 to 39. We're leading up to World War II, and so right as the Jews really need to get out of Europe, they're putting the wall up. No more Jews can come in. And then this is huge here, the British White Papers. And you have to be able to compare this to the Balfour Declaration. So Balfour Declaration, the British say, we're going to create a Jewish state. Jews are free to move into Palestine. Then the British White Papers, 1939, World War II starting. Now we're going to limit Jewish immigration to 75,000 over the next 5 years in Jewish land purchases. So you can't really be tied to the land. You're going to be controlled by the Palestinians. And now it's the British policy that Palestine will be an independent state and there will not be a Jewish state. And so they completely flip-flop. So neither side can trust the British. They made promises to 2 different groups, and they can't keep both of them. It's impossible. And also, again, the timing here. And Hitler uses this beautifully into his propaganda, sadly, because as he can point out here, going into World War II, look, Middle East doesn't want the Jews. America doesn't want the Jews because we put limits on how many refugees we would take. The British doesn't want the Jews. No one else wants the Jews, and so the best thing to do is to kill them. And this leads, of course, to the Holocaust, and then 1942, the final solution, where he really ramps up the killing of the Jews. So by this time, he's taken over most of Europe, and most of the Jews are going to be in Poland and that area. And this is where he sets up most of his death camps. And so during the final solution, Auschwitz, for example, is killing 2,000 to 3,000 Jews a day at that point. And here you can see a lot of the concentration camps. Not all of these are death camps. Of course, Auschwitz is the most famous death camp. It was definitely the most brutal one. And here you see some images, some survivors here of the Holocaust, and here a pile of dead bodies that were killed in the gas chambers. And we took these photos when we freed these camps for proof that this happened. And this is going to lead directly into the creation of Israel. And you got to know how this ties together. So again, we take these photos, prove that this happened. After World War II, of course, we win. Now we're a superpower, so is Russia. This starts the Cold War, so we're picking up allies where we can, and there's people in the Middle East that begin to support us. And those countries do really well, but not necessarily the people in them. And so again, this creates a gap between rich and poor. We're supporting regimes that are horrible to their people, still some of them today. And so again, this is going to encourage that distrust of the West. That here we are buying their oil, giving them technology, but we're supporting these regimes that take away any human rights. And so here we are, this democracy, supposed to be a champion of human rights, and here we are supporting countries that stone people for being homosexuals, that stone women for not wearing appropriate attire and things like that. Honestly, it doesn't add up on why we would do that, other than, of course, for the sake of money. And then you start seeing illegal Jewish immigration. So the Jews begin flooding out of Europe, obviously, after World War II, and they start flowing into Palestine. And the Arabs feel like they have less and less control at this point. And then some of these Jews turn actually to terroristic acts. So King David Hotel was bombed. That's where the British were at the time. That was kind of overseeing this because the British had royally messed this up big time. And so then you get into the creation of Israel. And again, the key here is that the Holocaust is what really drives the world to make Israel, to repay the Jews for this horrible loss they had. So the United Nations, which was just formed right around this time, creates a partition plan. Partition plans partition the land up. So the orange part would go to Israel, the Jews. The purple part would go to the Palestinians. So the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. And this is, of course, the original idea. And at this point, the British pull out. They're out of here. They've totally destroyed any kind of trust with either side. They completely messed this up. They started pretty much this entire conflict. It's their fault. And they just leave without offering any kind of help or solution whatsoever. So a bunch of cowards, they run with their tail between their legs. And then, moving on. So Israel gets created. And then the next day, so the first day they are a country, really, first full day, they're attacked by 3 countries, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, and Israel wins. And you're going to see a trend here of Israel being attacked, Israel winning, and then giving up the land that they take over in that winning. And Israel wins every time because they have the support of the United States, they have our military support and stuff like that, and so they have advanced technology these other countries don't have. 1948, again, we're supplying Israel and helping them out. And this is, again, why the Middle East is going to distrust the West, because Israel to them is part of the West. It's like the 51st state of America. So they just don't like them. So the Israelis begin evicting the Palestinians, and this starts the Palestinian diaspora. And so they begin to move out throughout different regions of the Middle East or into the different regions they're supposed to. So like on the previous slide, you see the partition of Israel. Obviously, there's going to be Palestinians living in land that became Israel, and so they had to move to the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, Golan Heights, or out of the area completely to any of these other Arabic countries. All right, then moving forward, 1956 Suez Canal crisis. So basically, Egypt closes the Suez Canal, so Israel cannot get shipping through there, so it's trying to cripple them economically. Israel takes the Suez Canal back, takes the entire Sinai Peninsula. UN has Israel give that all back, but forces Egypt to open the Suez Canal back up for Israeli shipping. 1964, you need to know what the PLO was. Palestinian Liberation Organization is formed to defend the Palestinians. Someone to protect their homeland. Their leader was Yasser Arafat, this guy here. He died in 2004. But you need to know definitely who they recruit. So just like a terrorist organization, you're looking for desperate, angry young men who don't have a future, don't have jobs, don't have an education. You get them into this kind of organization, begin to fight. All right, and then 1967, you get to the Six-Day War. Israel is attacked by Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, and Syria, and within 6 days, Israel defeats all four countries and triples the amount of land they have, and begins pushing Palestinians out of some of the territories that they were given. But again, it's because they feel like they can't trust them in those areas for their own safety. So again, Israel gives back the land they took over. 1968-72, get a war of attrition. Attrition just means there's really no goal in it. It's like, let's just kill as many people as we can. And this basically ends with Black September, a terrorist attack in Munich that targeted the Olympic Games, the Israeli team. And this is the first really big international terrorist attack that we see, and Israel responds with Operation Wrath of God on that one. In 1973, Yom Kippur War, Egypt and Syria attack Israel. This one actually almost led to a nuclear war between Russia and the United States. This one was huge as well. And then, of course, Israel wins. And then 1974, after that, OPEC, you need to know them, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. It's most of the countries in the world that export most of the oil. Most of these countries don't like us. So they cut off oil to the U.S. as a way to kind of choke our economy, and also that would drive prices up, and that would cause them to make a lot of money off of that. And so that was their way of punishing us for supporting Israel. But of course, they can't do that forever because we also buy a lot of oil from them. But it did cripple us for a while. At that time, gas stations literally ran out of gas. So again, OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. You see most of them in North Africa, Middle East, Indonesia, Nigeria, and then Venezuela as well. And most of those countries, aren't our biggest fans. Then moving on, 77 and 79, Camp David Accords, our first success with this. Egypt and Israel signed a peace treaty. They're still at peace today. Egypt decides the best way to move forward is to work together. 1986, the first Intifada. Intifada means uprising. Palestinians rise up in violence and attacks, and this is where it really goes more towards terrorism, attacking civilians, blowing up cafes, shooting rockets in elementary schools, that kind of stuff. 1993, Oslo Peace Accords. So here, another attempt at peace, works for a little bit. Then you get to 1996, and then Hamas, terrorist organization, Palestinian terrorist organization, bombs Jerusalem, Tel Aviv. Also, the Prime Minister of Israel is assassinated that year, so obviously it's going to ramp back up again. Then you get to your second Intifada, 2000, more suicide bombings, more rockets shot into elementary schools. And so it's really hard to support the Palestinian side when they're doing this. Obviously, Palestinians deserve a state just like anybody else and freedom. But when they're doing it this way, it just doesn't, it's not a way to really get people to like you. And here again, you can see the reason why they're turning to terrorism. In this picture here, you see a kid throwing a rock at a tank. And really, that's just to signify the fact that you cannot fight Israel head on. Like, Palestine does not have a conventional army. They can just go and fight Israel. They would get totally annihilated. And so that's why they resort to terrorism. But behind all of that, of course, the average Palestinian, they're not worried about land and some of this history and stuff like that. That's more of the political side. What they're seeing is their economic disparity, their lack of any kind of future compared to Israel. And so here, the average income, for example, around $20,000 a year in Israel, and this is back in the year 2000. Palestine around 2,000. But again, you can see the economic disparity. And again, education. Only a quarter of Palestinians can read and write. And then you get into how these terrorist organizations pollute the minds of the youth. Here's a kids show that Hamas has, saying things like this: "And Ayasud will finish off the Jews and eat them, Allah willing." And stuff like so. I mean, you have no chance to win the hearts and the minds of the people when kids at age 3, instead of watching Barney, are watching this and seeing horrible things like this. It's not going to bode for any kind of success. All right, and then again, looking at just some other numbers, Israel's about twice the size in population. Infant mortality is a lot higher in Palestine. Unemployment, 50% in Palestine. Poverty rate in Palestine, 75%. So again, you're taking away any kind of future from these people, and they're going to resort to violence. And then from the Palestinian point of view, so here's their land in green. White was Jewish land. As they're moving in, here's the original partition. And then with the wars that followed after that, Israel taking more of the Palestinian land away. And then with the Intifadas going through the 90s and year 2000, the Jews continued to push back Palestinian land and encourage Jews to move into Palestinian land to kind of push them out, mainly because of fear that, that they're going to attack them and stuff like that. So basically just trying to force them out of the region as much as they can. Get to the year, the 2000s, so basically you get more peace talks, and then it ramps up again in violence. 2006, Hamas gets elected as the Palestinian government, which is not good because we don't negotiate with terrorists, and that's a terrorist organization. And then, of course, Israel responds with airstrikes. 2007, we get more peace talks, and then it goes back and forth. So basically, it's like a roller coaster. It ramps up in violence and it slows down, then it ramps up in violence and it slows down. And that's basically the waves they continue to ride with seemingly no end in sight.